The still room was burning, and I was not running. 20 years of my life were going up in that room. Every tincture I had ever pressed, every jar my mother's hands had labelled before mine did, the whole of the only work I have ever been good at. And I stood in the doorway with the heat coming at me in waves, and made the calculation anyway, because there was one thing in that house worth more than all of it, and it was made of paper. Behind me, a man who had not raised his voice once in the 6 weeks I had known him was roaring my name in a register. I had never heard from him. And the men who had set the fire were between us, and one of them had already worked out exactly what I was going to do. I want you to understand that I was not brave. I was furious, and I was fast, and I had spent 10 years being told by every sensible person I knew that those letters were worthless. They were about to burn the only evidence in the world that 118 people had been murdered, slowly, on purpose, over a decade. I went in. 10 years earlier, I had wrapped a parcel of dried willow bark and feverfew, tucked a note inside it, and sent it to a pack I had never met and had no reason on earth to care about. My name is Vesna, and I have kept the still room in Belwyn since I was 19, which is younger than anyone should be handed a village's medicine, and older than I felt when it happened. I was 30 that autumn, a woman grown, unmarried, and entirely at peace with both, whatever the village had to say about it, and the village had a great deal to say about it. I had my work. I had my mother's jars. It was enough most days, and on the days it was not, I had learned to be quiet about it. My mother died when I was 18, of a wasting sickness that came slow and took 11 months about it. I wrote to every healer, every holding, every pack within 4 days' ride. Some of them wrote back to say they could not help. Most of them did not write back at all. I sat with her through the last of it, with nothing in my hands but water and willow bark, and I learned the thing that has shaped every year of my life since, which is that the worst part was never the sickness. The worst part was the silence, the knowing that somewhere out there were people who could have answered and simply did not think we were worth the paper. So, when I was 20, and the traders came through Belwyn with the news that the pack out on the Velmarch border was dying, a wasting sickness, they said, slow, taking them a family at a time, and no one would go near it because a struggling border pack is a bad debt, and everyone knew it. I did the only thing I have ever known how to do about silence. I answered it. I packed my best, not my seconds, not the bruised leaf and the weak second pressing that a sensible woman sends to charity. My best, the willow bark I would have given my own village, feverfew, marshmallow root, the good tincture that took 6 weeks to press. I sent it out on the carter's wagon on the 1st of the month, and I tucked a note inside. I want to be careful here, because people have since decided the notes were love letters, and they were not. They were work. They were what I would have written to any healer I was consulting with, and since I had no healer to consult with, and neither apparently did they, I wrote them anyway. What I saw in the traders' descriptions, what I thought it might be, dosages, questions, always questions at the end, every single time. Is it worse in the wet months? Are the children taking it faster than the old? Does it come back after it lifts? Tell me what you see and I can send you something better next time. Nobody wrote back. The first month, I assumed the letter was slow. The third month, I assumed the carter had lost it. By the 6th month, I had stopped assuming anything. And by the end of the first year, I had made my peace with a fact I found genuinely physically difficult to hold, which is that I had become the people who had not answered my mother. Except, I kept sending. That is the part nobody has ever been able to explain, including me. Every 1st of the month for 10 years. Through 2 bad winters, through the year I broke my wrist and packed the parcel one-handed. Through the spring, I was so ill I had the apprentice carry it to the wagon for me. 118 parcels, 118 notes, each one with a question at the end that nobody ever answered. The village thought I was mad. Hesper the carter, who took my coin every month for 10 years to haul it out to the border, told me to my face I was throwing good medicine into a hole. My own apprentice asked me once, carefully, the way you ask a woman a question about the thing she was strange about, why I kept doing it, when they clearly did not want it. "They're taking it," I said. "The parcels never come back. Somebody out there is opening them." They could at least say thank you. They could. I agreed, and taped up the next one and sent it. I stopped expecting a reply somewhere in the 4th year. I never once stopped hoping for one, which is a different thing and considerably more embarrassing to admit. The knock came on a Tuesday morning in my 10th year, and I nearly did not answer it because I had a poultice on the boil. The man on my step filled the whole of my doorway. He was enormous in the specific way that makes a house feel smaller, dressed well, but plainly, travel-stained, and he had the stillness of something that has been holding itself very carefully for a very long time. He was holding a box. "Vesna of Belwyn," he said. "Not a question. That's me. If it's the fever in the Hallow Row houses, I've told them it's the water, not the... It isn't the fever." He set the box down on my step and opened it, and I stopped talking. They were my notes, all of them. 118 slips of paper in my own hand, 10 years of them, tied in bundles of 12 by year, the earliest ones gone soft and brown, at the folds from being handled. Not stored, handled, read a great many times by the look of them, and kept dry, and kept flat, and kept in order. I put my hand on the doorframe, because the doorframe was there. "You kept them," I said. "Everyone. 10 years. My voice did something I was not proud of. 10 years and not one reply. Not one line. I sent you my best marshmallow route through a blizzard, and I asked you every single month whether the children were taking it faster, because I could not treat what I could not see, and you had time to tie them in bundles by year and not 1 hour in a decade to write me back." He did not flinch from it. I have thought about that since. Most men flinch. "No," he said, "I did not have that hour. I want to tell you why, and you are not going to like the answer, and I am going to tell you anyway. Who are you?" "My name is Declan." He looked at me the way you look at something you have imagined so many times that the real thing is almost an assault. 10 years ago I was 17, and my father was dying, and I was the one who opened the first parcel. I have opened every one since. A muscle worked in his jaw. "I'm the Alpha of Velmarch, and I have come 300 miles to ask you for something I have no right to ask, and to give you something I should have given you a decade ago. I want to tell you I said something dignified. You're the border pack, is what I actually said. The struggling one, the bad debt, because everyone knows Velmarch. That is the joke of it, the part I still cannot entirely hold in my head. In 10 years, the dying pack on the border had become the thing that holds the whole northern line, the march that turned back the raids of the last 2 winters, the territory whose alpha the old kingdoms had started calling king, without ever quite deciding to, because it had become embarrassing not to. I had been sending charity parcels to a power. I had spent a decade pitying people who could have bought my entire village twice over. "We were the bad debt," Declan said, "when you started." Sigurd came in behind him. His second, a broad grey man with the look of someone who had ridden 300 miles arguing the whole way, and the 2 of them sat in my kitchen, which was not built for men that size, and told me what I had actually been doing for 10 years. The wasting sickness had never lifted. That was the first thing. It had slowed in the years my parcels came, and it had never once stopped, and it had taken 118 people out of Velmarch in a decade. 1. On average, for every parcel I sent, which is a piece of arithmetic I have not been able to put down since. "It isn't a sickness," Declan said. "We know that now, we've known for 2 years, and we cannot prove a word of it. Then what is it? It's Bracken. I knew the name the way everyone on the border knew it. Alpha Bracken of Duncarrow, whose lands sat upstream of Velmarch's whole water table, who had spent 30 years being the reasonable neighbour, the one who sent grain in the hard years and condolences in the hard winters, and who had, it turned out, been putting something in the water for a decade. Slow, patient, never enough to kill outright, just enough to hollow out a pack, a family at a time, and call it bad luck. He wanted the march, Sigurd said flatly. Didn't want a war for it. Wars get noticed, a pack that simply withers. Nobody looks twice. Nobody even asks. He nearly had it. 2 more years and there'd have been nothing left of Velmarch to take. Why nearly? I said. And Declan looked at me across my own kitchen table with an expression I did not have a name for. Because a woman in Belwyn started sending willow bark, he said. You slowed it down. For 10 years you slowed it down, and you never knew, and he never understood, why we would not die on schedule. I sat with that for a long moment. I did not know what to do with my hands. That's why you came, I said slowly. Not for me. For the notes. Yes. At least he did not lie about it. I will give him that. 118 notes, he said, written across 10 years by a healer who had never met us and had no reason to shade the truth, each one recording exactly what she was told and exactly what she thought it meant. Is it worse in the wet months? Are the children taking it faster? Does it come back when it lifts? He touched the box once and took his hand back. You built a 10-year record of a poisoning, Vesna. You did it by accident, because you were the only person alive who kept asking us questions. There is not another document like it in the North, and the only person who can stand in front of the Pack Council and say what it means is the woman who wrote it. I looked at the box on my table for a long moment. 118 slips of paper. I had thought of them, when I thought of them at all, as the most humiliating thing about me. The questions I had gone on asking a wall for a decade, like a woman who could not take a hint. They're just notes, I said. They're not a document. Half of them are me guessing. The one from the 4th winter is mostly a complaint about my own wrist. The one from the 4th winter says the sickness lifted in the dry month and came back with the rains, and that you thought that was strange for a wasting sickness and wanted to know if the river ran high that year. Declan said it without looking at the box, and I understood, slowly, that he was not reading it. He knew it. The river ran high that year. It runs high every year it came back. You wrote that down 11 years before anyone in the North was willing to say the word poison out loud, and you wrote it because you were annoyed about your wrist, and asked anyway. I did not have anything to say to that. You keep calling it guessing, he said. It's the only honest record that exists. Everything else in the North was written by someone who already wanted an answer. You just wanted to know. I did not know, that morning, what else was in that box. I did not know that the man in my kitchen had an answer to my 10 years of silence that would take the entire shape of my life and turn it inside out. If you want to find out why a decade of letters went unanswered, and whether a woman who spent 10 years learning to expect nothing can survive being told the truth, stay with me. What I found in the bottom of that box is the reason I am telling you any of this at all. I went to Velmarch. Of course I went. I told the village it was for the council and the testimony, and that was true, and it was not remotely the whole of it. What I found there took me 2 days to get my head around. The keep was not grand. It was hard and lean, and full of people who had been surviving on purpose for a decade, and every single one of them knew who I was. That was the part I could not manage. A woman at the well stopped dead when Sigurd said my name, and put her hand over her mouth. A man missing 2 fingers walked me the length of a corridor, telling me about his daughter's fever in the winter of the 3rd year, describing my own tincture back to me in detail, the way you describe something holy. They had been keeping the jars. That is what undid me. Not the thanks. The jars. 10 years of my mother's labelled jars, washed and stacked in the keep's own stores, because nobody in Velmarch had been able to bring themselves to throw one away. "We're a border pack," Sigurd said, watching my face. "Nobody sends us anything. In 10 years, not one holding, not one kingdom, not one healer has ever sent us so much as a bandage. Then the first of every month, without fail, through blizzards, a parcel comes from a woman in Belwyn who's never laid eyes on us, and it's her best, and there's a note in it asking how our children are." He looked away. "You've no idea what that did to this pack, do you? You think you sent us medicine." I found Hesper's ledgers in my second week, and I am not proud of what I did next, because I had worked out by then that somebody had stolen 10 years of replies. It was the only explanation left. Velmarch had been reading my notes. Velmarch had been keeping my jars. A pack that stacks a stranger's jars for a decade does not fail to write back, so somebody had taken them, and I knew exactly who. Because there was one man who had touched every parcel and every road for 10 years and had told me to my face I was throwing good medicine into a hole. I went at Hesper in the Belwyn yard in front of half the village, with a decade of grief in my mouth, and I accused that man of stealing my life. He was guilty of a great deal. I want to be fair to the truth here. He had been skimming my coin for 10 years, charging me the long road rate for a route he ran anyway, and when I pulled his ledgers, he went grey, and admitted every silver of it. He had never touched a letter. There had never been any letters to touch. Nothing had ever come back down that road, not once, in 10 years, and his ledgers, which he had kept meticulously precisely because he was cheating me and needed the numbers to hold, proved it in his own hand. Nobody had stolen my replies. There were no replies. I went back to that box the same night, alone, and I took it apart properly for the first time. And underneath my 118 notes, beneath the false bottom that I had been too shaken to notice on my own doorstep, was the second stack. They were letters. In a hand I did not know, that got steadier as the years went on, the early ones written by a boy, and the late ones by a man. 118 of them, every one addressed to me. Not one of them sent. "The children take it faster. You were right. It comes on them in the wet months, and my sister is 7, and I do not know how to write this without asking you for more than you have already given. It came back. It lifted for 2 months, and it came back, and I have read your note from the spring 11 times, looking for what I missed. You asked what I see. I see my father not eating. I see my people thanking a woman who does not know their names. I see a parcel on the first of every month, and I have started to measure my life by it, and I am ashamed of that, and I am telling you anyway, because there is no one else I can tell. It is the 9th year, and I am the Alpha now, and I still cannot send this. I read them until it got light. Something in me went very still and very clear. He was in the yard at dawn, because of course he was. I had the letters in my arms. I did not bother with a greeting. 10 years, I said, and my voice came out steady in a way that frightened me. You wrote me back every single month for 10 years, and you never sent one. Why? And Declan, who had told me the truth about the notes, and the truth about Bracken, and the truth about what he wanted from me, finally told me the last of it. Because Bracken had the road, he said. Every road. He held the whole border and he read everything that crossed it. We knew that by the 2nd year. It's why we never sent word to anyone about the water. Because the moment we did, the pack that helped us became a pack he'd handle next. And you were not a pack, Vesna. You were one woman in a village with no walls, 300 miles from anyone who could protect you, sending charity to a territory he had spent a decade quietly murdering. His hands closed and opened. One reply, one line in my hand thanking you, going out on that road, and Bracken knows who you are. He knows a healer in Belwyn has been slowing his poison for years and writing down every symptom. How long do you think you'd have lasted? A woman alone with no house behind her name? So you said nothing. For 10 years I said nothing. I wrote it all down, and I put it in a box, and I said nothing. Every month. While the only person in the world who had ever answered us went on believing we couldn't be bothered. His voice cracked on it, and he did not stop. You want to know what it cost? Ask me. I'll tell you. It cost me every single thing except your life, and I would do it again tomorrow. And the fact that you spent 10 years thinking you'd become the people who ignored your mother is the thing I will answer for until I die. I had come into that yard ready to take a decade of pain out of his skin. I stood there instead, with 118 unsent letters in my arms, and understood that the silence I had spent 10 years calling the worst thing that ever happened to me had been, the entire time, the only gift he was strong enough to give me. You should have let me choose, I said. That was mine to risk, not yours. I know. I've known since the 4th year. He looked at me, and there was nothing of the king in it. That's why I came myself. That's why I brought all of it. Yours and mine, every word, the whole cowardly decade of it, and put it in your hands before I asked you for a single thing. You get to choose now, all of it, knowing everything. I would rather you hate me honestly than be protected by me for 1 more month without your consent. Bracken did not wait for the council. He had spent 30 years being the reasonable neighbour, precisely because reasonable men do not get watched, and he understood, the moment a healer from Belwyn rode into Velmarch, exactly what was about to be laid on that table. 10 years of independent notes, and the woman who wrote them. His first move was quiet, which was his way, a whisper into the council's ear that the Velmarch Alpha had produced a convenient decade of documents, and a convenient witness he was obviously bedding, that the whole thing was a fabrication by a dying pack desperate for a claim on Duncarrow's water. It very nearly worked. Half that council was ready to call it a border squabble and go home. So I stood up in front of all of them and did the only thing I know how to do, which is to say the plain truth to people who would rather not hear it. I have never met a single person in this room before this month, I said. I wrote these notes for 10 years to a pack that never once wrote back, which the Alpha of Velmarch will confirm, and which Hesper the Carter's own ledgers prove, and I invite you to check them, because he was robbing me at the time, and kept excellent records. That got a laugh, which I had not expected, and did not want. I am not a witness Velmarch found. I am a witness Velmarch spent 10 years hiding from, at a cost I am still working out. If you want to know whether these notes are honest, look at them. I did not know what I was recording. That is exactly what makes it evidence. Bracken's second move was not quiet. He sent men to Belwyn to burn my still room, because a decade of notes is only half a case. The other half was in my jars, my ledgers, my 20 years of records, showing exactly what I had sent and when. The thing that let anyone match my 118 notes to 118 deaths. The still room was burning, and I was not running. 20 years of my life were going up in that room, and I stood in the doorway and made the calculation anyway, because there was one thing in that house worth more than all of it, and it was made of paper. Behind me, Declan was roaring my name in a register. I had never heard from him, and the men who had set the fire were between us, and one of them had already worked out exactly what I was going to do. I went in. I came out with the ledgers, all 20 years of them, in a wash basket, with my hair singed and both my forearms burned in long stripes where I had carried them out against me. And I dropped that basket in the mud of my own yard and did not let go of it, even when my hands stopped working properly. Declan reached me a breath later. What he did to the men who had set that fire is not something I intend to describe, except to say that Bracken had spent 30 years being very careful never to be noticed, and had chosen, at the very end, to be noticed by the Alpha of Velmarch in person. The council took 4 days. My ledgers matched my notes matched Velmarch's dead. The whole 10-year arithmetic of it, laid out end to end, until even the men who had wanted it to be a border squabble could not look at the table. Bracken's own steward offered the choice between a dead cause and a living one, produced the accounts for what had gone into that water and who had paid for it. They stripped him of Duncarrow and everything in it. He will not see the outside of a cell again. I have been told he still insists it was a sickness. I have decided I do not need him to admit it. Because 118 people did not need his confession, they needed someone to write down what was happening to them, and by an accident of grief and stubbornness, someone did. The reading of the names took most of the 4th day. That was Declan's doing, and the council did not want it. They had their verdict. They wanted their supper. And he stood up and read all 118 anyway, one at a time, slowly, because he had decided that a thing which had been allowed to happen quietly for 10 years was not going to be concluded quietly in an afternoon. I had not known most of the names. That is the part I was not ready for. I had been sending parcels to a number, to the border pack, to them, to a word, for a decade, and they came off his tongue as people, with trades and ages, and the particular small details a man knows about his own. And by the 40th name, I had to put my hands flat on the table. He got to the 11th year and read a name I did recognise, because it was in my own note from that spring. "Is the girl in the mill house any better?" I had asked. Nobody had answered. She was on the list. Sigurd sat down next to me somewhere around the 80th and did not say anything for a while, which I had learned by then was that man's entire vocabulary of comfort. "You're counting the ones you couldn't save," he said eventually. "I'm counting the ones I asked about." Well. He watched his king work down the list, name by name. "Count the other way sometime. There's 400-odd people in this march who are not on that list, and Bracken meant every one of them to be. He had 10 years and a river, and nobody watching, and he still didn't finish. And there's exactly one reason for that, and she's sitting at this table refusing to eat." He stood up. "You'll not believe me. Everyone who's ever done a decade of something for nothing thinks it was nothing, but I've buried the 118. I know how many I didn't have to. I should say, for the record, that there was no scheming noblewoman in any of this, no rival at Velmarch's court, no jealous house working against me. I kept waiting for one. I had spent my life on the outside of enough rooms to expect one. There was only ever a patient man upstream, with 30 years of good manners, and a poisoned river. And I have thought since that this is the truer shape of most evil, not a rival who hates you in a corridor, but a reasonable neighbour who has decided you are a resource that has not finished dying yet. They tended my arms in the Velmarch keep, and the healer, a young man who had learned his trade, he told me, entirely out of the notes tucked into my parcels, which is a thing I still cannot think about without needing to sit down, told me I would carry the scars for life. I decided I did not mind. A woman who spent 10 years being told her letters were worthless ought to have something on her to show for the day they turned out to be the only thing that mattered. Declan did not leave while they wrapped them. When it was done, he set the box on the bed beside me. Both stacks, mine and his, the whole decade. And he did not kneel, and he did not make a speech, because he had finally learned, I think, that I had never once wanted either of those things. He handed me a slip of paper, one note, in his hand, folded the way I had folded mine for 10 years. It was the 119th letter, the first one he ever sent. I will not tell you what it said. That one is mine. I will tell you that it ended, as every one of mine had ended for 10 years, with a question, and that after a decade of asking the dark whether the children were taking it faster and hearing nothing come back, I finally understood what it costs to be the one waiting for an answer, and I did not make him wait. I kissed him first, with my bandaged arms and his 10 years of cowardice and my 10 years of silence, finally on the same side of the door. It was brief, and it was warm, and it settled something in me that had been braced since I was 18 years old and learned what it is to write into a silence that never writes back. The fallout was long, and it was not simple. Duncarrow's water table had to be dug out and rebuilt, a project that will outlive both of us. Velmarch's dead did not come back for a verdict. There were families in that march who did not want a healer from Belwyn honoured for a decade of parcels that arrived too late for their particular child. And they were not wrong, and I have never once argued with any of them. 2 years on, I still keep the still room. The new one, rebuilt in Velmarch, 3 times the size and stocked with everything the old one never had. Half the border thinks it beneath a lunar. I have found I do not care what half the border thinks, which is a freedom I did not know I was owed, until a man rode 300 miles to hand me a box. The jars came back to me too. All of them. 10 years of my mother's labelled jars, washed and stacked in the Velmarch stores by people who could not bring themselves to throw one away. Declan had them brought to the new still room the week it was finished, every last one, and said nothing about it, and left me alone in the room to find them. My mother labelled the first 40 of those in her own hand. I had not seen her handwriting in 12 years. I sat on the floor of a still room 300 miles from Belwyn and read her writing off a jar that had crossed a border, saved a stranger's child, and come home. And I want to tell you, I was dignified about it. And I was not. Hesper, of all people, still carries for me. He paid back every silver he skimmed, in full, in instalments, and refused to be forgiven any of it. And he runs the Belwyn Road twice a month now, free, hauling parcels out to whichever holding on that border has nothing and no one. He tells everyone it is penance. Sigurd says it is the only honest apology he has ever seen a man complete. I think they are both right, and the first of every month I still send a parcel, to somewhere else now, a new holding, a poor one, whichever the traders say has been forgotten this year. My best, never my seconds, with a note in it, with a question at the end. Nobody writes back, they almost never do. I have stopped needing them to, because I know now what I did not know for 10 years, which is that the silence is not the answer. The silence is just the part before it. I still wonder what would have happened if I'd been sensible in my 4th year, the way everyone told me to be. If I'd stopped, 118 notes, and the case would have been 18 notes, and Velmarch would be a story about a pack that withered, and nobody looked twice. I do not like where that thought ends, so I do not finish it. But I wonder about you. Was he right to stay silent for 10 years to keep me alive, or should he have sent one line and let me choose the risk myself? I genuinely do not know. Tell me what you think in the comments.